the Driven Dental Podcast.
So I'm here again with Josh, and last time we talked about 2024, and now we're going to talk about 2025 and what we're going to do to make a more stable, profitable company. So last year, we increased our revenue by $10 million, which is awesome. We went from $29 million to $39 million, but with that did not come as much profit as there should have been with that increase of revenue. And we have always structured the company for growth, meaning whatever we thought would boost our revenue is what we would do. And we didn't always take into account how much that would cost us. So the difference in revenue versus profit is the revenue or income is how much money the practice or the group is bringing in. The profit is how much money is left over after you've paid all of your expenses. And how we are judged for our growth from a bank's perspective is how profitable we are. So there can be some banks that focus on revenue. A traditional senior bank, which is what we have, focuses on EBITDA, which is another word for profit. So I'll go into that in a second, but overall, our 2025 mission is to build a more stable, profitable company. So we're going to increase our revenues in 2025, but we're also going to drastically increase our profit as a company. So EBITDA, why is that important? EBITDA is just another word for profit, essentially. And what that does is it measures how profitable a practice or group of practices is apples to apples, meaning some practices or businesses will have a loan, and it's not fair to compare one practice versus another in profitability if one has a loan and one doesn't. EBITDA removes loans and taxes and interest paid from the equation and just measures profit apples to apples. And again, why this is important is this is what banks are looking for in order to lend money. They have certain covenants or requirements that you have to hit in order for them to lend you more money. So if you have a certain amount of money they've lent you and you want to borrow more, they look at your profit and make sure that your company is in line before they lend you more. We're looking to continue to grow, so we want our banks to lend to us, but we need to make more profit for that to happen. So I'm speaking about this from the perspective of our company, but any dental practice can learn from this, or anybody working at a dental practice can learn from this, because what you can impact is your practice. And we're going to go through some ways that we're going to increase our revenue and profit, but again, anybody working in a dental practice, whether it's with us or another group, can benefit from this. So to start, I'm going to go over revenue versus profit. So again, revenue is income. In a dental practice, it's your collections. That is how much money you bring in, and then you have to pay all your expenses after that, and hopefully there's money left over. So that's the difference between what comes in and what is actually left over, which is profit. And what we learned in 2024 is that higher revenue doesn't necessarily mean higher profit. So if your expenses are out of line, then you can bring in almost endless amounts of money, but it's all going to go away if your expenses are too high. And at the end of it all, you're left with less than you should have had after doing all that work to get the revenue. So we're going to this year go back and look at everything line by line, which we'll talk about more later, to see what we can do to improve the stability of the company. So I underestimated how expensive growth is and how much we have to produce to offset our expenses. So maybe, Josh, if you want to talk real quick about how expensive growth is, let's say in a startup versus a acquisition.
So for us, when we do a startup, we look at a space that is big enough to have multiple providers, right? So we're looking at building offices that have 9, 10, 14, 15, 16, 18 operatories, to have 2 or 3 doctors, 4 to 7 hygienists. But when we're starting, we don't have the patient base for that, right? So we start off, for example, some of the startups we've done, we've built them with 9 or 10 operatories, but we start off with 1 doctor, 1 hygienist to start. But we have the construction cost for 10 operatories. We have a much higher rent because we're paying rent for the square footage of a 10 operatory practice, but essentially we're running a 3 or 4 operatory practice at that moment when we first start and open the door. And then as time goes on and we get more and more patients in because it's a brand new office, then we will, increase that capacity. We'll increase the number of providers we'll have. We'll have more staff. We'll have more equipment. But all of that also costs money. So yes, we will collect more by having more hygienists, but we also have to pay them. We have to have extra front desk staff to help manage that amount of patients coming in and out and answering the phones and collecting and all of that. We have to have more insurance people because now that office is seeing more patients. So we have more insurance to verify and to bill. And so there is increased costs as you bring in more revenue. And so what we really learned is that we need to get a practice to go from 1 doctor, 1 hygienist to at minimum, like at these practices, 3 hygienists, 1 doctor, preferably 2 doctors, 4 hygienists as soon as possible so that we can get to a more profitable spot at that office. And so some of our startups, they lose money or they break even the first year, year and a half, even 2 years before they get to that point. We have one that now they have 10 operatories full. They have, multiple hygienists. They have 2 doctors, multiple assistants, a full staff. And that office is doing great profitability wise compared to our other startups that, don't have all the providers yet, but they have the space for it. Mm-hmm. So there's, increased rent. Your air conditioning that in Florida, that much more of a bigger office. So your utility bill is going to be more. You have, equipment costs to equip the office, all the chairs and the bigger sterilization rooms and all the equipment that goes along with it, all the x-ray sensors and equipment. So that cost is higher. And so those are some of the things that can kind of contribute in the beginning with a startup versus, existing practice that already has that patient base built in when we do an acquisition. Mm-hmm. And they already have, however many chairs, however many operatories and providers already set with the amount of patients that they need for that to be profitable.
Yep. And then you mentioned it a little bit, but let's just say you have an existing office that you're adding a hygienist, just 1 hygienist.
One hygienist, you just have to make sure you have space for 1 chair. Whether there's a room that is, it's already plumbed and it's just like a storage or an office right now. Like that's what we've done at some of our offices where it's just minor amounts. We just have to have a chair, 1 more x-ray unit, another sensor, computer, and the instruments that the hygienist needs, a Cavitron, like just that basic equipment. It's just 1 instead of 10 or 12 or 15 operatories worth of equipment. You're not expanding your sterilization room any bigger for 1 hygienist, but now that hygienist is seeing more patients. So that is, 8 more profis a day you can see on the schedule. That is, 5, 6 new patients a day you can see on the schedule. And then that just helps that office's production go up. And then because your expenses are so much lower, just adding a hygienist to an existing practice or then your profitability goes up with it. Your EBITDA goes up.
So something to think about when you do spend $1, a lot of people, me included, when I first started, thought that let's say we spend $5,000 on marketing. You would think all you have to do is produce $5,000 to pay for it, but it doesn't work out that way because of 2 different types of expenses. And this sounds more intense than it actually is. So you have fixed and variable expenses. Fixed don't change no matter how many patients you're seeing or how many employees you have. The rent, for example, is the prime fixed expense to think of. So that won't increase if you spend $5,000 on marketing, or if you get $5,000 more in revenue. But you have to pay your doctor his or her percentage on what they produce. You have to pay for more supplies. You have to pay for more lab costs. So all these variable expenses increase
you
when
may
your
have
revenue
to add
increases.
another staff member if you're getting more patients in to handle that,
Right.
Whether it's a hygienist, an assistant, or front desk.
Right.
So you have a higher staff cost too.
Yep. So if you let's just say you spend $5,000 on marketing, you might have to produce $10,000 to $12,000 just to break even on that. After that is when you start making something on it. But that really helped me put into perspective. Every dollar we spend is actually, you have to work twice as hard to get it back.
Mm-hmm.
Just to break even. Because it's about 2 to 1 across the board for our practices. So taking a second to think about an expense before you say yes is, we'll talk about it later, but is really something to consider before just saying yes to even if it's something that you think will increase your revenue, you still have to think about it. So for us, we're going to start with the profit and loss statement, which is the dental 101 of dental finance. When I was talking about going through line by line, the P&L is your income, and then it's the list of every single expense, and what's left over is the profit after that. So we go line by line every month, and we did
at each office.
We did a deep dive in 2024 at the end of it.
Yeah, and like one of the things you were talking about fixed versus variable is like you didn't go into detail about the variable part. The variable expenses can range; they're variable for reasons. So that's like, your supply costs can go up or down based on how much supplies you used, right? Your employee cost can go up and down based on how many employees you have at that moment, how many hours each one worked that month or week, how many days you were open. So there's a lot of other variable costs. The lab costs, what lab you use for what type of cases can vary greatly. And then how many cases you need to use for a lab based on the type of whatever dentistry procedures you do that can vary too. So there's a lot of variable costs too. And the fixed ones, you kind of don't really have any control. You've signed on a long-term lease for your rent. So that's set, but your variable ones, those are the ones that you can dial in and affect the most. So in 2024, we definitely went through our P&L and looked and see like, what's the lowest hanging fruit? What's the easiest thing to make sense with that we can lower that cost without, compromising anything. And so I looked at like, what are we spending on our internet, right? And we had offices that were all over the place on what they were spending. And most of them hadn't had like a new contract negotiated in a while. And so I, sat on hold with Spectrum and Comcast, which is no fun for anyone, for days, and got new contracts with them so that their bill for internet and if they have cable and stuff went down like 40-50%. So that's just like hundreds of dollars for each office saved every month, times as you scale each office, that adds up really quickly. So looking at some of those variable expenses that you can affect and change, that was one of the things that we did in 2024 for sure.
Mm-hmm. Even the fixed ones too.
Yeah.
Technically you doing that was reducing a fixed. That's what you would think was fixed because you had thought it was under contract.
But they had expired, and they're like, oh, if you renew with us for another year contract, we have a special promotion going on right now that we were able to take advantage of. And then using them against each other too, like getting pricing from multiple companies and finding who had the better deal at that moment has been helpful.
Why don't you talk about, so we're going to go now into the actual strategies that we or you can implement to make your office more profitable, whether you work with us or not. But reducing overhead is obviously one of them. So can you talk about when we started shopping 2 suppliers?
Yeah, so we typically use one main distributor for all of our dental supplies, but then as we have grown, we started getting price quotes from another one too, and opened up accounts with both. And we've been able to use the two suppliers to kind of just them always try to work on better pricing for us to try to beat the other one and earn our business. And so we order about 65% with one and about 45 with the other, 35 with the other. And so it's been really good because we've seen our actual supplies percentage go down across the board, and the amount of money we spend as we've grown go up. And so then on top of that, with that, we've been able to go to the manufacturers that sell through these distributors and negotiate better pricing on certain supplies that our doctors use a lot of. So I'm, every year getting new contracts with the major suppliers like or manufacturers like Kerr or 3M or Dentsply, and based on the volume that we use, and as we add more offices or build more offices, that spend goes up, but our percentage has gone down because the price that we spend on them has gone down. Like price of like one supply would be like wipes that we use to disinfect everything, that every office uses Cavi wipes, right? That has gone down 40% in the last 2 years, our cost for them, because we've bought more and more since we've grown every single year. And so that's kind of one of the benefits of when a group joins with Operation Dental, is that we're able to use our scale, those economies of scale, to get better pricing on supplies. Same thing I've done with labs. There's a local lab here in Orlando that a lot of our doctors really, really like. And I was able to call and talk to the owner about like, hey, some of our doctors are really using you. Some other ones are interested, but your lab fees are a lot more expensive than some of the other ones in your area. Is there anything we can do if we, commit to sending some more cases to you that we could get a lower lab fee for our group? And so he was able to drop it $25, which over time with how many, how much lab work we send, that saves a lot of money over time across the board with all of our offices. So a lot of times it's just finding out who to talk to and then just asking. Because there's a lot of, as your volume goes up, your price can go down on a lot of those fixed or those variable expenses. Mainly the biggest ones in a dental office would be, supplies and labs.
When an assistant is ordering through two suppliers, how do you have it set up so they can quickly check the price for each one?
So at least all the stuff we do is online. And so all of the manufacturers have like their own distributor code, but then the manufacturer has a code for it. So for Cavi wipes, it has its own like 4 or 5 digit code. And that code is good at any of the distributors' websites. So I have them go in one and put everything they want in the cart, for the week before they're going to order, like during that week. And then they order at the end of the week. And then the first couple of days, they add up all the things they need in between patients in their cart. It's like shopping on Amazon. It's very similar. And then I have them pull up the other one and then just copy and paste that one code and check the other distributor and then price compare. Some will be, the same exact price. Some will be, 50 cents more versus the other. Some will be many dollars more, like some can be like $10, $15, $20 more on one versus the other. And so then delete from the one that's less expensive and add it on the other cart. And then at the end of the week, just place an order on both of whatever's in your cart. The other thing you can do is if you start ordering the same supplies over and over again, you're going to need Cavi wipes and that this one has a little bit better price than this one. You can create a shopping cart list where you just put those things that you order every month that you always need, and then it automatically is in there in your cart. And then you can just adjust the quantity or you can remove it if you don't need it that month. So I have all the offices setting up and saving like a shopping list cart on both of our distributors' websites. And then like the other thing is like using those manufacturers because they all want our business. And so there may be certain supplies that we don't even know about that are new or that are redesigned or that would cost us a little bit less. And so that's the other thing is using the manufacturers to come in to the offices, educate the staff, the doctors, the providers on whatever that supply is, give them some free samples to try it out on and see if they like it. And if the doctors are happy with it, and that would give us a cost savings on our supplies, then we make that switch. So they, instead of using, this material for cement, for crowns, they'll use a different competitor's cement because they've already evaluated it. They've learned about it, and then they've evaluated it, and they're happy with it, and it saves us, $20 a box of cement. Mm-hmm. That definitely is another thing that we've done to save money too.
Yeah. So the place to start, if you're trying to be more profitable, I think, is looking at what you're spending and just cut out whatever is unnecessary. It's the easiest, fastest way to find.
And it sounds really simple.
Fruit.
Yeah. Whatever's not needed, what's not necessary, or if there's something you can purchase that you don't need to continually repurchase. So a lot of our offices we bought water distilling machines, and they make their own water and refill jugs rather than going down the street to the store and getting distilled water, 10 gallons every couple weeks to use in the autoclaves. Mm-hmm. We spent that one-time cost to buy the distiller, and then they just add tap water, and it makes the distilled water throughout the day, and they fill up their jugs, and it's part of the routine of the sterilization is on top of, sterilizing instruments. Oh, let's turn on the distiller and recharge it. Yeah. So like things like that too, that we were spending at some of these offices, like, just buying gallons and gallons of distilled water, like one that's wasteful plastic that we don't need to be using, and now we're reusing it and doing it ourselves. Mm-hmm. So it saves money in the long run. So any of those kind of things you can do, and then just start talking to your vendors and asking, like, your labs or your vendors, like, what can I do to save money? I have the whole team at both of our distributors that are actively like looking at what we're spending on and meeting with me quarterly and like giving suggestions and talking to the manufacturers like, hey, this other supply, have you guys ever used it? Do any of your doctors know about it? They really, have really good pricing on this that you might want to consider. So they're also helping me like offer suggestions. And then from there, I go from it and I kind of filter it to our team, our clinical team, and ask them.
Okay. So another strategy to make your office more profitable is using data. And what data tells you or it lets you know what you're up against. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of guessing with numbers, and then once you see actual numbers, it allows you to make informed, intelligent decisions and removes the guessing out of it for the most part. One example that I thought of that's really important for us is our marketing budget is over $1 million a year, and in order to spend that type of money, you can't go on feelings. You have to know the return you're getting for that and to know that it makes sense. Mm-hmm. So Dave, our marketing director, has built this elaborate spreadsheet that it's insane, but it also is extremely informative. And that's for us as a group. I'm really looking forward to 2025 because he's gone back in time and knows so accurately where our patients have come from and knows which channels in marketing is worth our money to spend on it. So for us, or for you at your practice, I think you have to track what is most important and start there. We've limited what we track to maybe 10 to 12 things. I think a lot of people tend to track everything or nothing. Mm-hmm. So we track what is absolutely the most important and makes the most impact on our practices. But we're going to do more of that in 2025.
For sure. I mean, we have a lot of KPIs that we look at with each team at each office and with our regional managers, like reviewing it with the teams as well. So there's certain metrics that we're looking at for the office, for providers as well, so that we can kind of measure, where they are and how they compare to our other offices and
And if you are
what
a
changes
provider,
we need to make.
If you are a provider or work in an office, you should know what your office is doing.
Yeah.
Like you should spend some time every month in your P&L and the practice software running those reports at a minimum. I think a lot of dentists, maybe and hygienists too, like they just pull their production report, but there's so much more to a practice.
What are some other ones they should look at?
They should look at, production collection is the place to start. Mm-hmm. But the patient information, I think, is the most critical. I think reviews online is a place to start to make sure that your customer service levels at the office are at the place they're supposed to be. And if they're not, you can make adjustments. That's at a global picture. But then looking in your software at how's your case acceptance? Are patients saying yes? Is your practice growing or shrinking? What are your new patient numbers? And are your patients that you're seeing making another appointment with you?
So that's a big one that we figured out in 2024 was patient attrition, like looking at how many new patients are we getting, but then how many patients existing are going somewhere else.
Right.
And there's always going to be some attrition. People move, people, get different jobs, different things like that. Sometimes people will come in, but they don't go to the dentist every year. But figuring out at some of our practices, like, are they growing? Are they adding more new patients than they're losing, or are they shrinking?
Right.
And that was kind of eye-opening for us for some of our practices, just seeing where they've been at in 2024, and then what adjustments we need to do to try to affect that for next year.
Right. Yeah. So to see if your practice is growing or not, you measure the active patients that you have. And that, like Josh said, goes down with time because people move away or change dentists, whatever happens. But however many patients stop coming to you, your new patient count has to be higher than that, or your practice is actually shrinking if it's lower. So that's one aspect of it. But to keep more patients in your practice is patient retention.
Mm-hmm.
And we started tracking when patients leave, if they left with their next appointment. That is typically around 90% yes, which I think would be pretty standard across most dental offices. If they're a good office, most patients will leave with the appointment. The next level to that is tracking 6 months, 7 months, 9 months, or a year from that last appointment. If they canceled their appointment some point within leaving with that appointment, and then that 6-month recall, or if it's been a year since we've seen them, that's where you lose your patients. So we're making a real effort this year to make sure to keep the patients we have. And again, Dave has built the spreadsheet for a retention spreadsheet that he is tracking when we're losing these patients. And we will now be able to go in and know way more accurately when we need to call these patients and start brainstorming ideas to keep them coming back with us.
Yeah, and I mean, it all starts with the people we have. We want to make sure that, our employees provide a really great experience for our patients. Nobody likes going to the dentist. I've met very few people that are like, I love the dentist. It's usually an anxiety-filled, time for a lot of people, or, the sound of the drill really just can be hard for people. But what can we do to make sure our patients leave happy and tell everyone else to come see us too?
Yep. Yeah, and the other thing too is we're in Florida, and it's very, very competitive here.
Mm-hmm.
So each patient is incredibly valuable to keep, because if you look back over 3 or 4 years ago, what you had to pay Google, for example, to acquire one patient may have been around $100, and now it's doubled or tripled that to get one patient. Depending on the office, it could be even more than that. But you're spending so much money to get that patient. It's so much cheaper and easier to keep them once you have them.
And that's also why it's really important to make sure that your front desk is super staffed to answer the phone when those new patients call, because you're spending a lot of money on marketing to try to attract new patients to come visit you.
For sure.
So that's another thing that we've definitely implemented as well as just making sure we answer the phones too, and having the front desk fully staffed to be able to do that. And even at some of our offices, having people who that's all they do is just answer phones.
Yep. All right. So far we got reduce your overhead, use your data, and then keep your patients, patient retention. The next thing for us that we're going to work on is more organic growth, which means the practices we already have, growing those practices. So we've done really well in the past at starting with 1 doctor, 2 hygienists, getting the 2nd doctor, getting the 3rd doctor, and the larger practices we have turn out to be the most profitable because the fixed expenses stay the same there, and we're able to max out the space that we have. So we're going to continue to add operatories, add hygienists, add providers wherever and whenever we can, whenever it makes sense. Getting the most out of what you already have is the cheapest way to go. Because we were talking earlier a little bit about how much more expensive a startup is than something you already have. So I think for me, I was always focused on revenue, or just growth. So I would just think we need more practices, but not necessarily. Like I've had to mature in that way to know, like, it might be a little more boring to work on stuff you already have, but
if you could get more profitability out of what you have,
easier.
And it costs less money as well. But we are doing some growth. There's a couple of our offices that we're going to expand and add more chairs, more operatories in them, more providers.
Yep.
So that's exciting in 2025.
Yep.
And then, case acceptance is a big one too. With our existing patients, just having our teams, explain everything with the patients and find out if their case acceptance isn't as high as some of the other offices, like looking in why, and then having them also evaluate like how everyone, the team is talking to the patients, from the doctor to the assistants to the front desk to the treatment plan presentator. So.
Yeah, our team's probably tired of hearing about case acceptance, but it's the real measure of like what your customer service is. And if you're a provider and you say somebody needs something, you're recommending something. If they don't get it, then they're not getting the treatment that you say they need. So, and it also means that you're not getting the most out of what you already have. We've spent all this time, money, and effort to get the patients to the practice. So you have to maximize those patients if you want to have a profitable business. So I will keep talking about case acceptance, but it's a major part of organic growth, and then just the overall stability of a practice and measuring customer service. So outside of that, if you work with us or with any dental group, the easiest thing, or the main thing you should focus on before working on all these other things really is yourself. And if you are doing what you can at your position, whatever that is, that's the best you can do. And so ownership mentality is something we talk about as a company constantly. I think that's just ingrained, hopefully, in our culture, because we talk about it from day one on the interview. But this is me making sure that we don't deviate from that, making sure that it's not just like numbers are important. We're trying to be more profitable. We have to be more profitable, but it starts with the people, and that starts with you. So I thought of some simple examples to display an ownership mentality, and maybe you want to explain what ownership mentality is to you.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's whatever your role is within the company or within your office, it's just taking every day and treating it as if you were the one in charge, you were the owner of it. And so for me, it means like never accepting less than I would accept for any other employee that I work with, right? So pushing myself further, to be better, to do better, to learn more, to just ways to grow and to challenge myself in general. But it's mainly like decisions we make, I'm not thinking them for my best interest. What is in the best interest of the company or for the practice? And so that's kind of where I get with ownership mentality, is just a lot of times there's been so many times I'm just like, what would Matt do? And so that's been really helpful, is just like thinking like an owner. If I do this, how will that benefit XYZ practice, or how will that benefit Operation Dental? And if I don't do this, how will it, like, what would be the negative ramifications of it too? And if it makes sense, it would help the office, or it'd help the company, then I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
No matter if that means I have to do more work on the back end for it. It's what's best for the company to grow.
Right. Yeah, because we can't be everywhere at once.
Mm-mm.
And so we rely on people to run the office as if it's our own. Even if you're just a dentist with a solo practice, if you're in the back working, you don't know what's happening up at the front.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you have to have trust or an ownership mentality from your front desk. Otherwise, your practice is going to struggle.
Yeah. So we just, try to get the team to buy in and because we are all part of the team. We all, no one person can make Operation Dental or any of the practices that we manage by themselves. It's a team effort. It takes everyone doing their part. So what are some of those examples?
So simple examples: show up to work early, prove that no job is below you, clean the bathroom, empty the garbage, answer the phone. This is something that I've always done pretty instinctively, I feel. Like, when I go to a practice, I actually always go check the patient bathroom and just walk in. And if it's a mess, I clean it up.
Yep.
And it's just part of the DNA. Just do it.
And I love it when I see people on the team, like I've called an office and one of the doctors answers the phone.
For sure.
And I'm like, "You're answering the phone?" He's like, "Yeah, the other people are on a call." He's like, "What do you need?" So I love it when that happens.
Obviously, be engaged and focused while you're at work. And this is what you were talking about. Do not tolerate unacceptable behavior from yourself or your team. And do not tolerate mediocrity. Remain calm during stressful situations. Stay through the end of the day, even if only hygiene is left working. I've seen that, not to call out specific dentists at all, but there's a thing where once the dentist is done, even if there's still other things going on in the office, they take off. And it's just stay that extra few minutes, like help the team break down the rooms, clean up, whatever it is. Like just stay those extra few minutes. It will show that it'll set the example for the team. And then saying thank you to each team member at the end of the day, especially if you're in a leadership position, if you're a provider, say thank you. They're there. The team is there trying to help you, especially if you're a provider. So telling them thank you for the hard work all day at the end of the day is very, very important. So yeah, those are the main things I could think of for 2025.
I'm excited for what's going to happen this year.
Yeah, I think we're going to get dialed in for us, and then hopefully, even if you don't work with us and you're listening to this will help you think of some things you can implement in your own practice.
Yep.
So
Thank
you
you.
have it. Thank you.